Our old buddy Lisa Graves, the president and executive director and editor-in-chief at True North Research, the president of the board of directors for the Center for Media and Democracy, truenorthresearch.org, and the Lisa Graves on Twitter, L-I-S-A, Graves, and it's True North on Twitter. Lisa, welcome back. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Tom. I've been enjoying your show so much over the past year, and your writings over the break have just been so penetrating. Thank you for having me on, my friend.
Well, thank you, and back at you. So you've got this piece, How the Koch Network Hijacked the War on COVID. This was actually Walter Bragman and Alex Koch wrote this, but this particular one that I'm looking at. But what is going on with the Koch Network, and can we just even define the Koch Network here?
Well, you know, that piece, I'm so proud of the work of the Center for Media and Democracy on that piece. It really probes into the structures at George Mason, the Mercatus Center, and other universities that Koch has funded and programs he has funded that have really been trying to provide the scaffolding in many ways for this attack on vaccines, on, preventative measures and more. And, I'm reminded that when Charles Koch was the main, major funder of the Libertarian Party, when he was basically the core funder in the 70s of that party, one of its major platform planks was opposition to vaccinations.
Really?
As well as, opposition to major federal infrastructure around, disease and, the economy and other issues, but specifically opposition to mandatory vaccination.
So it wasn't opposition to vaccines, it was opposition to the government mandating vaccines. Do I have that right?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Thanks for that clarification.
Because as libertarians...
At that time, it was not so common to be opposed to vaccines. Kids are required to get vaccines for public school, as they have for many, many years. And so it was an outlier position, as with a number of the outlier positions in that platform. Yeah,
very interesting. So what about... So for people who don't know what we're talking about, can you define the Koch Network for us?
Well, there are a lot of definitions, but my definition is basically Charles Koch, who is one of the richest men in the world, in the history of the world, who inherited his father's company and runs one of the biggest sort of multinational oil conglomerates on the planet, and his billionaire buddies, which he's gathered for well over a decade to help fund his agenda to remake America in his image. And so the Koch Network has certainly spent at least $1 billion over the last decade trying to influence American elections through a number of dark money parts of their infrastructure, as well as these sort of more I suppose they're thought of as less controversial, but these programs at universities like George Mason, where again Charles Koch has spent cumulatively hundreds of millions of dollars on trying to change what people are taught at universities and trying to fund academics who are advancing his agenda, his mission.
Yeah, it's kind of I was going to say a one-man culture reinvention scheme, but it's not just one man. There's a collection of these billionaires and their hangers-on and their retainers and their colleagues, and they reach into every single state. I mean, there are these policy centers in every state. You've got ALEC. There's a whole variety of pieces to this that seem to, at times, particularly in the news, stand independent. But these are part of this network?
That's right. And ALEC has been funded by Koch Industries now for almost 30 years. Koch Industries has had a seat on ALEC's board of businesses, its advisory board. It chaired that board. And Charles Koch groups attend and influence those meetings of ALEC where state legislators vote as equals behind closed doors without the press or public presence. They vote as equals with state legislators on measures. And they also underwrite ALEC, which has been a key force in attacking, common sense public health measures in response to COVID, and even trying to immunize businesses for exposing their customers and their employees to COVID. And so ALEC not only has been attacking voting rights through spreading mass disinformation about the big lie, which I call the big lucrative lie, but also has been at the heart of trying to fuel these state legislators in stopping and trying to deter measures that most most trusted, most experienced public health experts recommend.
Yeah. Tell us about COSA, the Convention of States Action.
Yeah, so, there's a part of ALEC's effort is really an assault on our Constitution as it currently exists. They have a number of ways in which ALEC has tried to help invoke a constitutional convention, which hasn't happened since our Constitution was created, more than 200 years ago. And, if this is a group, ALEC, that's corporate funded, can you imagine a constitution that would be written by the type of dark money and oil industry interests that fund ALEC? But that's precisely what they're promoting, is a convention supposedly to limit federal spending. But if it were invoked, and they just need a couple more states to get there, it would be no holds barred in terms of rewriting our Constitution. That is also happening as ALEC is trying to push forward efforts to repeal the direct election of senators, because through gerrymandering or unfair maps, they can create minority rule in states where there's a Democratic majority, and they disdain that senators are elected statewide, and they can't gerrymander that. But if they were able to change that and have the legislatures elect senators, then they would be able to consolidate their power further in our United States Senate.
So they're trying to undo, what is it, the 19th Amendment?
No, I don't remember.
Or the 20th Amendment?
Direct election of senators.
17th?
I'm so sorry.
It's right around there somewhere anyway, yeah.
It's been around for over 100 years. We've had direct election of senators, and they want to do that too.
Yeah, that's pretty breathtaking. They have been having annual meetings in Washington, D.C., where they actually are having these practice sessions of holding a constitutional convention, taking our Constitution apart, rewriting it to satisfy the requirements of right-wing billionaires, and then stitching it all back together again. Now, they've been doing this for years and years, and I realize that they're just a few states short of being able to actually pull this thing off. What specifically are outside of ending the direct election of senators? I'm assuming we're talking about changing things like the Commerce Clause, giving business more power than government, those kinds of things.
Well, we don't know. We can assume they claim it's in order to pass this sort of make a constitutional balanced budget amendment a reality, which would really make Grover Norquist's vision of being able to drown the federal government in a bathtub. It would be so small, in his infamous words. It would just crush the U.S. Economy and crush our ability to contend with real world problems, like even more than that we aren't able to really contend with right now, which is climate change and pandemics and things like that. And so ostensibly it's about the balanced budget, but it's really about rewriting the Constitution. I suspect it would advance the interests of the NRA in terms of expanding, gun rights, machine guns, what have you. It would likely advance the agenda of corporations to try to throw off regulations that regulate their polluting and pollution and impact on climate and much more. And certainly I would suspect that they would be trying to advance an effort to enshrine in their new Constitution an opposition to women's reproductive rights and the ability of women to control their reproductive destiny. And by the way, thanks to Google, it's the 17th Amendment is the direct election of senators.
17th, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, good on you. And I think we need to remember that corporate personhood is not in the Constitution. As John Paul Stevens pointed out in his dissent in Citizens United, the modern business corporation didn't even exist when the Constitution was written, and is literally an invention of the Supreme Court, stretching from 1886 forward. And that the idea that giving money to politicians, what we used to call bribery, is free speech, whether it's billionaires bribing politicians or corporations, that is also an invention of the Supreme Court. So I'm assuming that those two things, corporate personhood and money as free speech in politics, they would also try to write into the Constitution. I remember when I was writing Unequal Protection, my book about the history of corporate personhood back in 2005, at that point, it was just being reported that when South Africa put together their new constitution, AT&T gave them volunteer lawyers who helped them write corporate personhood into their constitution. I'm guessing that that's the kind of thing that ALEC would try to do here.
Well, I think that's right. And I was going to say your book, Unequal Protection, really is a must-read. If viewers and listeners haven't had a chance to read it yet, I really recommend it. It's just so thorough and compelling. And you're right. The fact is that when corporations have a hand in constitutions, that does not bode well for the people. And in this instance, even though in some ways the right wing has been successful in rewriting our Constitution without our consent, in the way that they have reinterpreted the First Amendment to try to give protection to these billionaires like Charles Koch to spend unlimited money on elections. And by the way, he helped oppose the original FECA in the 1970s. So this is a long-standing objective there. I'm sure it will be part of this agenda.
Yeah, amazing. The great Lisa Graves, Executive Director and Editor-in-Chief at True North Research, President of the Board at the Center for Media and Democracy, truenorthresearch.org. Lisa, thank you.